Hey everyone, whether you're watching on YouTube or you are tuning into our podcast, I'm really glad that you decided to join us today. My name is John, I'm the digital pastor at The Ridge, and we're in the third week of our At the Movies series. Now during the At the Movies, what we do is we take clips from movies and we pull out some spiritual truth to help us better put into practice the teachings of Jesus. Now I love it because I love movies and because it's a fun way to help us grow our faith and our understanding of God. Fortunately, due to copyright laws, we cannot post these messages on YouTube or make them available on demand. We can only stream them on our website. So if you haven't already, I want to invite you to join us for At the Movies, streaming each week. And you can find all the details on that by visiting our website, click on the At the Movies button, or you can just follow the link in the description. Now, we can't stream At the Movies on demand, but what we can do on demand is bring back one of our favorite series from the archives of The Ridge, called How to Love Your Life. It's a series that focuses on how adjusting our pace of life can lead to truly loving it. Now, those of you, if you're watching for the first time and you're trying to get a good feel about what a weekend service at The Ridge looks like, I want to invite you to check out our Relationships on Purpose series, where you can find that is in our show notes. That's going to give you a great idea of what a usual service around The Ridge looks like. Now, for today, let's continue week 3 of How to Love Your Life.
Well, welcome to everyone here in Greenfield and to those who are joining us online, wherever you are today. Thank you for spending part of your day here with us. My name is Tyler, and actually I get to serve as one of our pastors here at The Ridge. And part of what I get to do is lead and serve our online campus. And I don't know if you know this or not, but every week we actually have hundreds of people join us through YouTube. And so if you're joining us on YouTube right now, we want to welcome you. YouTube is a lot of fun. In fact, it is the second largest search engine, and you can go and watch videos on just about anything that you may have questions for. And so as a result of that, I like to spend a lot of time on YouTube and check out very different channels, learn a little bit more about it so that we can do the best that we can with The Ridge Online on YouTube. And one of the most fun channels I've come across lately has been that of Mr. Beast. And you may have heard of Mr. Beast before. He's a fun guy. He's 23 years old, and he actually has 88 million subscribers on his YouTube channel currently. In fact, an article just came out and said last year in 2021, this guy actually made the most money off of YouTube than anyone has at all that year. Anyone know how much? Just a cool $54 million just in YouTube revenue from people watching his videos. And you might be wondering, well, why are that many people watching him and seeing all that he's putting out there? Well, what he does is really fun. He actually gives away a lot of money and a lot of stuff. And he just does this with everyday people that he comes across. And he often makes it into fun competitions. Like there's this one where these 4 guys he comes across, he has them put their hand on a briefcase and there's $1 million in the briefcase. And he says the last one to not touch it, to like put their hand off of it, they get to keep the briefcase full of $1 million. So it's really fun to see how they react with that. But one of my favorite challenges that he does is he'll go to a store and he'll actually bring a camera crew with him. And in the store, he'll tape a red circle on the store. And he grabs a random shopper and he says, hey, you get 10 minutes. And in the 10 minutes, you can grab whatever you want, put it in this circle, and if you get it all in there within 10 minutes, and if it doesn't touch the circle or if it doesn't spill out, you get to keep whatever you put into that circle. And so it's a lot of fun to see how they think about it. In fact, we got some footage from some guys doing that in Best Buy. And he's like, hey, just grab whatever you want in Best Buy. If it doesn't spill out of the circle, you get to keep it. Now, I want you to imagine if this was you and you got the opportunity to go and to put whatever you want in that red circle. I mean, what are you gonna grab? I mean, you're gonna grab the things that you want that you would say are the most valuable to you. In fact, if this was me, I would follow these guys' lead. I would go and I'd grab a Nintendo Switch for my kids and myself, like, hey, we wanna play that. My iPhone's a couple years old, so I might grab a new iPhone. I might grab a running watch, but I'm gonna think about the things that I want because I'm not just going to grab a bunch of like random stuff or stuff that I'm like, yeah, it's not that important, like a bunch of phone cases or whatever in random aisles, because I don't wanna risk it spilling over and touching the circle or spilling out altogether and my losing. I mean, you want to grab what is most valuable to you. Now, I want you to keep this image in mind as we are going through today, as we are in part 3 of our series called How to Love Your Life. And what we're seeing is that many of us, we are going through life, and even though there are things that we enjoy and there are people, that we genuinely love, many of us, we wouldn't say that we love our lives or we enjoy our lives. And so to help us love our lives, we would just say, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna grab more, we're just gonna add more, we're gonna cram more in, we're gonna pick up speed, we're gonna go, and just keep adding things so that eventually we will love our lives. But what we'll figure out is it's like we're cramming more into the circle and it's spilling out. And it just goes everywhere. And we're like, we find ourselves tired and exhausted, and we would say we still don't really love our lives. And we might even be wondering, hey, is there a better way than this? Well, the good news is there is. And we're discovering what that way is. In fact, to kick off this year in 2022, we are actually looking at not just the teachings of Jesus, but also the life of Jesus, because Jesus was not just this brilliant teacher, but he lived his life in such a way that we would say, there are ways that he set the example that if we follow that, we could love our lives. Because here's what we see about Jesus. Jesus was actually one of the most productive people to ever live, but he loved others deeply. And he invites us not to just follow his teachings, but to also follow his life and the way that he lived his life. And when we follow his example, we could live in a way that we would love our lives. In fact, the way that Jesus lived and taught could be best summarized in an invitation that he offers to you and to me. And here's that invitation. He says, well, are you tired, worn out, and burned out on religion? And many of us would probably say, yeah, that's me, that's who I am. Well, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest, which is what so many of us long for. Walk with me and work with me, watch how I do it, and learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Just keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. In other words, you'll learn to love your life. And so Jesus invites you and I to follow not just his teachings, but the way that he lives his life. And the best way to describe how he lives this and how we can love our lives comes in 2 words. Those 2 words, just slow down. Just slow down and follow his teachings, follow his ways. And what we'll learn is we can be slow and productive, and yet we will genuinely love our lives. And so what we're doing throughout this series is we are looking at some of the practices and rhythms of Jesus' life, and we're just taking them and we're applying them to our lives right now. We're putting them into practice, and we are discovering how we can love our lives. Now, if you missed the first 2 weeks, I want to invite you to go onto our YouTube channel, hit subscribe, and watch the first 2 weeks on our YouTube channel. Definitely make sure you watch those and catch up before you get sucked into all those Mr. Beast videos, but go ahead and check that out on YouTube, and definitely make sure you're subscribed so you're notified when other videos are available. Now today, we're gonna look at another practice that we see straight from the life of Jesus. But this practice we're gonna talk about today, is going to be the toughest one for us to do, and it's going to be the toughest practice that we're going to talk about through this entire series. The reason why is this practice is very countercultural. It's going to feel very unnatural for us, but when we put this into practice, my hope is that you and I will continue to discover that this is a way to help us just genuinely just love our lives. And what we're going to talk about today is the practice that Jesus sets for us when it comes to this one word of simplicity. Now, before I unpack and define what simplicity is for us today, I want us to set this up by going back to the idea of Mr. Beast. And if we go back to the idea of the red circle and the limitation of what you could put in that red circle, because if we're honest, our lives are like this red circle. We have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of energy, and a limited amount of resources for us to be able to put and cram all in the red circle. And if we try to cram more and more and more and more in, ultimately it'll spill out and it'll feel like we lose and we don't love our lives. Now here's where you and I have a problem. We have many things every day telling us that they should be in our red circle. And they keep telling us, hey, you need to fit me into the red circle. You need to cram me in. You need to add me and add me. In fact, studies are showing that every day, on average, we are exposed to 4,000 ads a day. You know, whether that's through going on social media or visiting different websites or TV commercials or radio ads, whatever it may be, we have 4,000 things a day tell us, I belong in your circle. And you want me, and not only do you want me now, put me in the circle, and we think, yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. I mean, we've all had experiences like this. I can think of a couple years ago when my wife and we moved into our house. We're first-time homeowners. My internet searches must have queued off the rest of the web advertisers that I'm a new homeowner. And many of you have had an experience like this. I'm scrolling through social media, and I'm getting ads for products that I never knew existed, and I've never thought about them before. And they're all things that are advertising to me saying, you need this. Here's why you need this. You need this to keep your tub looking brand new. You need this to keep your lawn looking good. You know, you can't forget about your dryer vents. You need to clean this, this way. And I'm looking at all of this stuff. I'm like, oh, I never thought about this. I need to have this. And so I'd go and I'd buy it, and then I'd buy it and I'd get it. And then I'm like, now I got to figure out how to use this. And then I have to spend time doing this. And I get more ads that are telling me that I have to do this. And over time, I start stressing out because I'm like, oh, I am spending way more money than I thought I had to on this house. I'm spending way more time on trying to figure this out. All my free time is going to this. I'm getting stressed out thinking I got to do more and more and more because this house has become more of a burden than a blessing for us. And you may have had an experience like this. I mean, you might have been going through TikTok and you got those TikTok ads and you're like, I got to get that. And then you get that and you're like, I don't know why I got this, but I guess I needed this. And so you're trying to figure that out. Maybe your friends signed their kids up for this new sport and you heard, what it took to get involved in that sport and you're like, ooh, that's a couple more $100 than I wanted to spend and it's a couple more weeks or months than I wanted them to be in a season, but since my friends put their kids in it, I guess I got to put my kids into it. Or maybe you see a coworker go on a vacation and it looks nice, and you think, I need to go on that vacation. In fact, I need to go on a better vacation, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I can go on this vacation, even though I haven't saved up for it. I'll just charge it. I'll figure it out later, and then later comes, and you're like, oh, why'd I go on that vacation? Because now it's stressing you out. Or maybe you get to a stage in your life, and you're like, I deserve a better car. I deserve a bigger house. Let's figure this out, and because I need to get this, and you're trying to figure it out, and you're just trying to cram it all in to your red circle. And we all have this because these advertisements and these messages, they're so good. They're designed to cause us to say, I want that. But not only that I want that now. Not even that I just want it. They convince us to tell ourselves, we need it. In fact, they whisper to us what ultimately is a lie, and it's a really good lie because it causes us just to naturally believe it. And this lie is this. Well, if you just buy this product or this experience, then you will be happy and you will love your life, at least happier than you are currently. That if you just get this and put this in your circle, that this will be the one thing that will cause you to love your life. And so we believe it and we go and we buy it. And then what we discover is it it's not all that it cracked up to be. In fact, we're seeing this from many psychologists who are studying this, and they're watching us just cram everything and more and more and more into our circles. And what they're discovering is we are not getting happier. In fact, a psychologist is showing us that the more we cram in, the less happy we actually become. In his book called The Progress Paradox, when everything gets better and our lives get worse, which, I mean, think about that as a book title. I mean, that's just great there. Greg Easterbrook, he actually has this great finding. And here's what he writes down. He says, hey, adjusting for population growth, there are 10 times as many people in the Western nations today suffering from unipolar depression or unremitting bad feelings without a specific cause than did half a century ago, 10 times as many as they did 50 years ago. And then he says this, Americans and Europeans have ever more of everything except happiness. As you're getting more and cramming more in the circle, the less thing that you are doing is loving your life. And I've experienced this. In fact, a couple years ago, I was just feeling these bouts of anxiety just creep up inside of me. And I needed to actually see some help for it because it was just creeping up more and more and more. And I was meeting with a counselor, and this counselor helped me just kind of like peel back the layers to these anxious thoughts. And he helped just ask the question like, well, what am I really afraid of? And what I discovered what I was really afraid of was not having enough and not providing enough for my family. Now, this was really interesting because if you rewind about 12 years when my wife and I first got married and we first started our first entry-level jobs, we did not have a lot. I mean, we didn't have a home. We weren't making a whole lot, comparatively. And we had hand-me-down furniture. So by many accounts, it would look like, yeah, there wasn't that much, but the anxiety was not there. And you fast forward 12 years, we have our home, we have our kids, we are making more than we did back then, and we actually even had newer furniture. We have a lot more compared to that, but yet I'm feeling more of those anxious thoughts and those anxious feelings than I did even 12 years before that. And so as we move on and as we look at what's going on here, I want to be clear. This isn't going to be a, hey, don't have stuff. This isn't about that, because we still have stuff and we still enjoy our things, and it's okay to enjoy things. See, the problem isn't stuff when it comes to loving our life. And the problem isn't even having stuff. The problem comes when our stuff is having us. And when it's feeding us that lie where we just tell ourselves we have to cram more and more and more and more into the circle, and then we'll be happy, and then we'll love our lives, and it'll spill out, and then we find that we have more anxiety because that appetite for more, it is never fully or finally satisfied. We have to have more and more and more, and then we'll be happy, but the happiness never comes. And so, what do we do about this? Well, if we go back to the life and teachings of Jesus, Jesus actually gives us a way that we can love our lives when it comes to our stuff. Now, side note, many of us, we might think about Jesus and think that he didn't have any stuff. But what we see is that Jesus actually did have stuff. He was actually well provided for by his followers. He had a treasurer, that took care of their finances. And Jesus had close friends who had a lot, and he had close friends who did not have a lot. And so Jesus actually worked through this idea of what do we do with our stuff. And he actually lived in a way that shows us how we can deal with stuff, and he taught in a way. In fact, one of his most famous messages, often called the Sermon on the Mount, he spends about a quarter of his time talking about how we can love our lives when it comes to relating with our stuff. But he didn't just talk about this. He also lived what he taught about this. So we're going to look at a portion of that here. And he talks about, here's how you can love your life with your stuff. And he starts off by saying this. Hey, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Instead, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And he's talking about the red circle. And he's like, hey, you want to focus on the red circle because what you put in is going to be the most important thing for you. And when it comes to this idea of what you prioritize, here's the key. If you sum up what he's teaching, he's saying, hey, don't treasure treasures. Don't put the stuff that is there first in the circle, because it ultimately will lose its value. It's gonna need to be replaced. It's gonna get damaged. It's gonna need to be updated. It will lose its value, so you don't wanna put that in there first, because it will lose its value over time. Instead, treasure the things that will last. Invest in those first. Make sure that they're the first things in your red circle. And the things that would last are your relationships with God, your relationships with those that you love. Say, value those, invest in those first. And then he talks about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What he's telling us is that when we invest in something and we move our treasure there, our time, our talent, our resources, our heart will follow and move into it. So if you want to move your heart to something, just move what you treasure, move what you invest in. He says, what you treasure, your heart will follow. And so he starts off with this point, don't treasure treasures. And then he makes a statement about how the world works. Here's what he says. He says, no one can serve two masters. That's you and that's me. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And then he keys in right here. He says, you cannot serve both God and money. And Jesus is just making the statement of how the world works. This is like a scientific law, like E equals MC squared or other scientific laws. He's not saying you should not serve both God and money, but that you or I, we cannot serve both God and money. So he says, hey, when it comes to this red circle, we have to make a choice about what we're going to prioritize, what we're going to invest in first. And he says, you can only have one. You have to make a choice. So are you gonna make the choice to follow Jesus, to receive the freedom that he offers and the rest that he offers? Or are you going to give into the lie that if you just buy this product or buy this experience, then you will be happier? Are you going to invest in the things that last, or invest in the things that ultimately don't last? And Jesus says you cannot do both. You have to make a choice. And if this is causing some tension in you, if this is raising up some, but I don't know about my needs, how do I ensure that I'm being provided for? What do I do about this? If that's raising up that tension, that's good. That means you're paying attention and you're getting what Jesus is saying here, and he's inviting you to make that choice. In fact, Jesus knew that the first people that were hearing what Jesus was saying, he knew that they were wrestling with this as well. And so he reassured them with this. He reassures us with this. He says, hey, therefore I tell you, don't worry. Don't worry about your life and what you will eat or drink, or about your body and what you will wear. Because is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? And so let's look at the birds of the air. I mean, they don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father, he feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? And that's a rhetorical question there. I mean, obviously you are, and they are, and we are more valuable. He's like, hey, God's going to provide. And God is going to take care of you. And Jesus, in this statement, he's so brilliant. I mean, Jesus is just the master teacher. And he's just speaking to us, and he just connects together something that is just so fascinating. He connects the idea of investing in treasures that don't last. He connects it to our worry. And I can't help but wonder, in a culture today where anxiety levels are just rising and rising and rising, and it almost feels like an epidemic in its own right, could it be connected to the fact that we have access to more and more and more and more stuff? According to Jesus, it could be. Because we're just cramming more and more and more and more into our circle. And we're going into that lie. If you just buy this, if you just have this experience, if you just do this, then you'll be happier. And then we become even more disappointed and more anxious when we find out it is not fulfilling, that happiness doesn't last. And so, how do we love our lives? We follow the practice of Jesus when it comes to stuff, the practice of simplicity. And we just try it out, and we just try what Jesus is doing to see if he's right, and if we do love our life. And if you try this out, my bet is you're gonna find out that he is right, and this is a key to love our life. Now, you might wonder, well, what is simplicity? I mean, there's other words about what simplicity is. Some call it simple living. You might hear it referred as minimalism. You know, that's what some websites and blogs who talk about this practice, but they don't necessarily credit Jesus for this practice. But we want to, look at Jesus's way of practicing this. And so this is the idea of simplicity or simple living that he offers us. And a couple ideas of what it's not. Simplicity is not living in poverty and giving up your house or giving everything out of your closet. This is not a vow of poverty that you're taking. Simple living and simplicity, it is not giving up enjoyment of your things. And it's not giving up the freedom to enjoy stuff. I mean, you can still enjoy different things. It is not living with nothing and just saying, I got to get rid of it all. It is not doing that. And it's not just organizing your things where you say, hey, I have all this stuff in my circle. I'm just going to find a more efficient way to keep track of it. It is not doing that. But the best way to define what simplicity is with this phrase. Hey, it's just living with less. It's making the choice to live with less so that you can enjoy the things that matter more. That you're going to make more room for what's in your red circle. Say, I'm going to value this more. I'm going to choose to live with less so that I can focus on the things that matter more. Now, this is going to feel very unnatural at first. And so you might wonder, well, how do I get started with this just to see and just try out if Jesus' way is the best way to do this? And I want to give us a couple ideas that we can put into practice this week. And we can just try this out together. And we can just try out what Jesus is saying so that we could see the benefits from simple living. And so here's a couple ideas. Pick one. And then when you do that for a little bit, then pick the next one and then pick the next one and just try out what Jesus is saying here. So here's the first idea of simple living. The first thing you can do is just release. And this is, we're going to release some things that we have and give them away. This is if we have that red circle and it's just full of stuff, we're going to take some of that stuff and we're just going to release it and give it away. Now, some of you might be fans of Marie Kondo and you're like, oh yeah, if this just didn't spark joy, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. Well, maybe, but this is actually bigger than that. Because this is actually, hey, we're going to take something that we have and we're going to release it and we're going to do it in a way that is going to bless someone else so that they can have it and we can see the joy of them experiencing that. What's been great in our house over the last few months is we are seeing the joy of releasing in our home. My wife has just come up with a brilliant idea. We have officially moved out of the preschool phase in our house. Our kids are now in elementary school, and I am just so thankful for that. You know, that we don't have little itty bitty kids running around our house anymore, but we have a bunch of little kid items all in our basement. And so we're talking about, well, what do we want to do with that? And the first idea, that's thrown out there is, well, do we want to save it just in case? And the idea of just in case for me, I'm like, no, we don't want to have just in case, but so we're like, well, what do we do with this stuff? And then you talk about the idea of, well, do you sell it to recoup the cost? Do you have a big garage sale? All of that stuff. And then my wife was scrolling through Facebook and she said, hey, Tyler, I'm coming across all of these Facebook groups, these buy nothing groups that are popping up in all of these different communities designed to help people connect together and help each other, especially with the rising costs of inflation of stuff. And she became a part of this local buy nothing group with all of these moms. And she said, Tyler, there's some local moms that are young, single, don't have a lot of stuff. There's some foster moms there. She's like, I could actually just post pictures of this stuff and we can just release it and just give it to them and not charge a thing and just bless them with all of that. And they can go and they can do what they need to with all of the stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And so she's posting pictures. She's meeting up with these moms. She's giving them this stuff and she's encouraging them. She comes back. She says the joy on their faces by being blessed with these strollers and these toys and these clothes. She said, Tyler, it is such a blessing. I mean, it's so good. It is far better than any money that we could have gotten back and definitely far better than the stress of organizing a garage sale. And it's just that idea of just, hey, let's just release it and give it away. Now, a common pushback to this idea of release is, yeah, but what if I need that? What if it comes back and I'm going to need that at some time? This is where the trust in God comes back in, where Jesus said, hey, don't worry. God will take care of you. God will provide for you. If you release it, do we trust that God will provide and meet the needs that we need? And so that's the first idea. We release what's already in our circle to bless others. The second idea is we're gonna make the choice to buy less. And just say, we're just gonna buy less with the money that we have. Now, you might be thinking, hey, where was this right before Christmas? Well, that might apply, but this is bigger than Christmas, because studies are showing us that 60% of Americans have actually gone out of their way to buy something just to help them feel better. But then they had financial regret after that. And so we want to make the conscious choice to say, you know what? We're going to buy less. In fact, I love what the psalmist says in this prayer. He says, turn my heart towards your statutes, God, and not towards selfish gain. And this is the prayer of simplicity, where we can just make the choice and say, you know what? Even though I could, I'm gonna make the choice just to buy less so that I'm not cramming as much in my circle so that I can focus on what matters more. And a great question to ask yourself to help you buy less is that when you are ready to buy something, you just pause and ask yourself the question, well, hey, what is the true cost of this? Really? I mean, if you were to buy that item, how much would it cost to insure it? How much would it cost to maintain it, to keep it up, to update it if it needs to be updated? And don't just think in terms of cost. How much time would it take for you and energy for you to maintain it, to use it, to enjoy it? What is all involved with this really? And if you stop and think about the cost, there might be some things that you might say, yeah, that's not worth it. You know, I don't want to just go ahead and cram that in my circle. I want to prioritize other things. So I'm going to make the choice to go ahead and to buy less. And when you do this, that frees us up to do the next step, probably the best step out of simplicity. And that just frees us up to get to the spot where we really, really love our life. And it gives us the ability to say, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to be able to give more and to bless others and to invest in the relationships that will last. Paul, one of the first church leaders, he wrote a letter to this young man named Timothy, who is also a church leader. And he spoke to him. He was echoing the words of Jesus when Jesus gave his message. And here's what Paul told Timothy. He's like, hey, I want you to command those who are rich. Time out. We might be tempted to say, hey, this doesn't apply to me. But I want us to stop and think about this. Because if you're here or if you're watching this right now, and if you had the opportunity to drive anywhere today, what we see is that you would be in this top 7% of the world today. If you had the option to eat 3 meals today, you are in the top 40% of those in the world today. So what Paul is about to write here is going to apply to most of us. Hey, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share, because it's in this way that they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of, get this, the life that is truly life. It says, here is how you love your life. That when it comes to your life, and you would look that you have this red circle, and you can only put in a limited amount here. Here's what you want to do. Practice simplicity. Choose to buy less and not cram it full of stuff and so that it spills out. It raises our anxiety, it raises our stress. But instead, we choose to invest in others and we give towards those relationships. We bless those and we'll discover what Paul says. You will experience this life that is truly life. In other words, you will really love your life. And this is how we encounter God. In fact, the times that I have felt the closest to God when it comes to stuff is not in my getting stories. I find the presence of God closest to me in the giving stories. And this is hard. I mean, this is a challenge that has been hard for me over the years, and it can continue to be a struggle because it just is so unnatural to us at first. But we first began to experience this blessing, my wife and I, back in 2011 when we were here as part of the Ridge, and the Ridge was actually meeting at a local high school. And we were connecting with with lots of families, but we felt like God was leading us to actually pursue a permanent location. And the reason why wasn't just so we could have, an easier time meeting. It was really to have a spot where we could actually set ourselves up well so we could launch new churches and new campuses. We could bring the hope of Jesus to even more homes. It's actually allowed us to connect with many people online because of what we're able to do. And so we just knew it was just going to be an opportunity to just be a launching pad to bring the hope of Jesus to many more people. But we just had a small group of people. And so what we challenged ourselves to do was to go through a generosity initiative and just give above and beyond what we were regularly giving so we could find ourselves in a location like this one here in Greenfield. And so my wife and I at the time, we're just praying. We're like, hey, God, what do you want us to give to this? And we got to a number. And the number we got to did not make sense at first. We're like, God, that's really big. How would we get to that? And it was then that we were introduced to the ideas of simplicity, that we would actually choose to live with less so that we could focus more on the things that matter the most. And so we were like, okay, we're going to try that out. And we gave up some vacations. We gave up some extra experiences. We committed to say, you know what, we've spent a lot on each other here. Let's live on less here so that we can give more here. And that was several years ago. Now, you fast forward to today in 2022. And each week when we open up the doors to this building, when we go online and we connect with people there, we hear stories each week. And the stories are incredible. I mean, people come in and they take their next step, they make their decision to follow Jesus, and their marriage is restored. Or their kids take steps to follow Jesus and they get baptized. And they walk away from a life that they're like, oh, I'm so glad that I'm walking away from that hurt or that hang up or that depression. And I'm experiencing this new life in Jesus. And we hear stories of that. And my wife and I, we get home and we talk about those stories and we're like, wow, we saw God do this and God do this. And we're just so excited as we see these relationships and we see this movement happen. And you know what never comes up in those conversations when we talk about that? We never say, hey, I really miss those extra 2 nights out. I really miss that extra vacation, or I really miss that extra thing that we could have bought, or even those extra big gifts that we bought each other a long time ago that we said, we're just going to choose to live with less so we can invest in this more. That never comes up, but we just feel the presence of God. We say, God, you have moved, and your way really is the best way. And every time we're tempted to say, you know what, let's just cram more in the circle, because it's hard, and there's times we fail. But what we realize is, when we practice simplicity, there's just something that Jesus does to show us that our heart moves towards his heart, and we can love the life that is truly life. And so our challenge for us, and I say us because this includes all of us, is, hey, would we take this step to just push past what culture says, to push past the lie that if you just buy this, that you'll be happy. If you just do this and just take the step, say, hey, Jesus, I'm gonna follow your lead and I'm gonna choose to live on less so that I can focus on the things that matter more. We're gonna release, buy less, and give more. And what we'll discover is not just the life that is truly life, but we'll see that Jesus' way is right, that when we do this, we will really love our life. Hey, let me pray for us. God, you are the God who gives, and you set the example of giving to us by giving us your son, Jesus. And God, you invited us to receive him, and we are so grateful for the gift of life that he has given us. And God, as we look at the example that Jesus gave, and he just didn't teach. I mean, this is how he lived. As your followers, we want to follow the same way. And so God, just continue to lead us and call us out and stretch us. And even when we feel like, I don't know, and we want to cram more, and we want to cram more in, God, I just pray that you would remind us the way that you called us to love our lives. And just help us see the blessings in simplicity. Let us take that step, release, buy less, and give more, and see the blessing that really comes, that we would invest in things that really last. And God, I pray that as we do that, we would experience what you've promised us, and that is the life that is really life. God, we thank you that you were so loving and so good that you went first and give us Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
Well, thanks for watching and hearing Tyler's words on how simplicity can help you live your life. In my experience, loving life really often goes hand in hand with experiencing the hope of Jesus. And if you're new around here today, I hope that you moved a little bit closer to just fully experiencing all the hope that he has to offer. And if you are someone who would say that you have the hope of Jesus in your life, you've made a decision to follow him, I want to invite you to share that to the world. And the way that Jesus said that we do that is by getting baptized. So if you've made a decision, that's your next faith step. We have a baptism celebration coming up. You can find all the details on dates, times, how to sign up at theridgecc.com/baptism. Thank you all so much for just joining us this week and hearing out about how to love your life. Be sure to check out At the Movies, streaming each week at 9 and 10:30. Find that on our website. And may the hope of Jesus be in your home. And let's work together to bring it to the homes of those around us.